Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. On November 11th, 2010, in one of Cape Town's most underprivileged neighborhoods, locals stumbled upon an abandoned car with shattered windows. Inside the back seat was the lifeless body of a young woman who had recently traveled to South Africa with her husband for their honeymoon. What initially appeared to be a random crime quickly unraveled into something far more complex. Questions began to surface. Why were they in such a dangerous area late at night? What role did her husband Shrien Dewani play in the events? And what lay behind the conflicting accounts of their story? This marked the beginning of one of the most puzzling cases of the decade. Annie Dewani seemed to be on the brink of a perfect life. In February 2010, she moved from Sweden to London to be closer to her fiancé, Shrien Dewani. It was a natural progression for a whirlwind romance that had only begun 6 months earlier. Their introduction was orchestrated by Annie's aunt, who believed Shrien was an ideal match for her niece. But behind this seemingly flawless pairing lay a web of circumstances far more intricate than anyone could have anticipated. Shrien Dewani, a 30-year-old businessman from Bristol, didn't leave much of an impression on Annie during their first meeting. Arranged by her aunt, their initial date was unremarkable for Annie. However, their second encounter proved transformative. Shrien invited her to see The Lion King musical in the West End, an experience that left Annie deeply moved. From that point on, their relationship grew, with Shrien doing everything he could to win her over. His generosity and attentiveness charmed her, and Annie began spending more and more time in London. But Annie's story began far from the bustling streets of London. Her parents, who had emigrated from Uganda, faced significant challenges as they settled in a small Swedish town called Mariestad. Annie and her 2 brothers were born and raised there, experiencing the struggles of their parents' journey to build a better life. Annie's father eventually established a successful business, providing stability and security for the family. It was within this environment that Annie grew up, shaping her dreams and ambitions. By the time she was 25, Annie had built a promising career working in the marketing department at Ericsson. Despite her professional success, she found herself increasingly preoccupied with thoughts of the future. She longed for love, a family, and the possibility of having a daughter or son someday. London became a city of new opportunities and connections for her. Visits to relatives opened her eyes to its vibrant possibilities. Ultimately, London became the backdrop for the fateful meeting between her and Shrien. Shrien's family, wealthy and influential, owned a chain of daycare centers across the UK. However, Shrien didn't limit himself to the family business. Through his hard work, he significantly increased the company's revenue, earning a reputation as a dedicated and driven individual. This ambition and determination left a strong impression on Annie. Their relationship progressed quickly. Shrien went out of his way to earn Annie's trust and affection. Together, they visited top-tier restaurants and exclusive clubs, living a life of luxury. Annie quickly adjusted to this new lifestyle. For 6 months, she regularly traveled back and forth between Sweden and England until she finally decided to move to London. On the surface, their relationship seemed like a dream come true. A beautiful couple, successful careers, and a glamorous life. But beneath this perfect image lay complexities that would soon disrupt their apparent happiness. Step by step, Annie embraced her new life, unaware of the events that lay ahead. In the spring of 2010, Annie's family flew to Bristol to meet Shrien's parents for the first time. The Dewani family's luxurious home, with its expansive garden, high-end cars in the driveway, and overall opulence, left a lasting impression. Despite the visible differences in lifestyle, both families warmly embraced each other and supported the engagement. However, behind the facade of wealth and harmony were underlying tensions that would later come to light. In the summer of 2010, Shrien proposed to Annie in Paris. Chartering a private jet, he flew her to one of the city's most renowned restaurants. The highlight of the evening was when a waiter presented a dish adorned with a red rose and an engagement ring under a silver dome. Shrien got down on one knee and asked Annie to marry him. Overwhelmed by the romantic gesture, she said yes. The wedding was scheduled for the fall of that year, and preparations began immediately. The ceremony was set to be a grand affair, with a budget of nearly $250,000, befitting the Dewani family's stature. However, during this time, Annie began confiding in close friends and family about her growing doubts regarding the marriage. She spoke about the tension in her relationship with Shreen and admitted she wasn't happy. In private conversations and messages, she expressed fears and uncertainties, even confessing that she sometimes felt trapped and unsure if she could spend her life with him. The warning signs had appeared well before the Paris proposal. Despite the lavish gestures and luxurious lifestyle, Annie had started to notice that Shreen was overly controlling. She often felt stifled, especially as they spent more time together. A stay in Mumbai before the wedding, where they checked into a hotel together, only intensified the strain. Constant arguments, emotional distance, and feelings of pressure left Annie questioning whether she should go through with the marriage. Family members later recalled how Annie openly spoke about her unhappiness. She didn't hide the fact that there were moments when she wanted to escape from the relationship entirely. But societal expectations, family pressures, and the looming wedding left her feeling cornered. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, the tension reached its peak. Annie frequently mentioned feeling overwhelmed and uncertain, as if she had no way out. During these events, the first months of their life together seemed deceptively smooth. Shreen, who appeared caring and generous, turned out to be someone with whom Annie felt increasingly uncomfortable. Their relationship, which began with lavish trips and expensive gifts, gradually lost the ease and joy it had in the beginning. Conflicts emerged, and the couple struggled to resolve them. From the start, Annie noticed unusual behavior from Shreen. He categorically avoided any physical closeness. Even simple gestures like hugs or kisses were dismissed as unnecessary. Shreen claimed to hold strict principles, insisting on preserving intimacy until after marriage. However, Annie began to suspect there was a deeper reason behind his reluctance. Shreen was also evasive about his past. The only detail Annie learned was that he had been engaged before, but the wedding was called off shortly before they met. He avoided discussing the reasons for the breakup, which only heightened her unease. Annie confided in her sister, speculating that Shreen might either be inexperienced in relationships or hiding issues he didn't want to reveal. Arguments between them became more frequent. At one point, during a particularly tense exchange, Annie even threw her engagement ring back at Shreen, saying she didn't see a future for their marriage, but Shreen was persistent. Even when Annie attempted to call off the wedding 3 separate times, he always managed to convince her to proceed. She felt obligated to go through with it, for the sake of her family, who had already invested significant time and money in the preparations, and for the guests who had made plans to attend. Finally, on October 19, 2010, Annie and Shreen were married in front of a large number of guests. Just 10 days after the wedding, their honeymoon began. The first destination was South Africa. The couple spent several days on a safari in a national park, and Annie texted her family to say she was enjoying the experience. However, things began to take a turn when they arrived in Cape Town. At the airport, Shreen decided to rent a taxi, even though their hotel offered premium transportation services. This was when he met a driver named Zola Tongo. Tongo drove the couple to the luxurious 5-star Cape Grace hotel. Shortly after checking in, Shreen left the lobby, leaving Annie alone, and spent about 10 minutes speaking with Tongo. According to Shreen, he suggested that Tongo act as their private driver for the remainder of their stay in Cape Town, offering to show them around and recommend places to visit. This choice was unusual, especially considering the high-quality services provided by their hotel. Nevertheless, Shreen opted for the services of a random taxi driver who operated a standard Volkswagen minivan. The decision seemed inconsistent with the image Shreen often presented of himself as a successful and high-status individual accustomed to a life of luxury. The events of the honeymoon left Annie with mixed emotions. After spending a few peaceful days in South Africa, she began to notice more signs that her relationship with Shreen was not meeting her expectations. The tension that had been present before the wedding lingered. Shreen remained distant and controlling, and his decisions became increasingly puzzling. Despite these concerns, Ani tried to focus on the positive moments, hoping that their time in a new environment might strengthen their bond. On November 11th, the day began uneventfully. Shreen and Ani spent the afternoon relaxing by the hotel pool. In the evening, they visited a bar on the hotel grounds, appearing calm and happy. Security cameras captured footage of their interaction, and photos from that evening show the couple smiling. Later, they decided to have dinner outside the hotel and called their driver, Zola Tongo, to take them to a restaurant on the other side of the city. The dinner, which began around 9 p.m., lasted about an hour. Tongo picked them up afterward to drive them back to the hotel. During the ride, Annie expressed interest in seeing the real South Africa, as opposed to the tourist-friendly parts of Cape Town. According to Tongo, she insisted on visiting a neighborhood where she could experience the local way of life. Tongo suggested Gugulethu, a notoriously dangerous area known for its high crime rates. Between 2005 and 2010, the neighborhood recorded more than 700 crimes classified as serious offenses. Despite warnings about the risks, Shreen and Annie agreed to the detour. At approximately 10:45 p.m., the vehicle stopped at an intersection. Two armed men approached the car. One of them shattered the driver's side window with the handle of a firearm, then opened the door and forced Tongo out of the car. The perpetrators took over the front seats, leaving Shreen and Annie in the back. From that moment, the situation spiraled into chaos. The armed men, aggressive and demanding, began ordering Annie to hand over her jewelry and other valuables. They assured the couple they didn't intend to harm them, but warned that they would release the two separately. Annie and Shreen begged not to be separated, but the attackers insisted. About an hour into the ordeal, the vehicle stopped, and the assailants forcibly removed Shreen from the car through the broken window. Before leaving him behind, they confiscated his phone to prevent him from contacting law enforcement immediately. Left alone on the side of the road, Shreen started yelling for help. He knocked on the doors of nearby homes until a local resident finally let him in. Still in shock, Shreen asked the resident to contact the police. Meanwhile, Tongo, who had been released earlier by the attackers, had already alerted the authorities. A search operation was launched, with Ani now classified as missing. Shreen and Tongo each gave separate statements to the police, describing the events of the night. After his statement, Shreen was escorted back to their hotel, Cape Grace, as law enforcement worked to coordinate the investigation. The next morning, a resident in the Khayelitsha area reported a gray Volkswagen minivan parked suspiciously by the side of the road. The vehicle had been there for several hours, raising concerns. Police arrived at the scene around 8:30 a.m. and discovered the body of Annie Dewani inside. She had sustained a fatal gunshot wound to the neck. Investigators determined that the bullet had first struck her hand, as she appeared to have raised it in a defensive gesture before passing through her neck and lodging in the seat behind her. Medical examiners concluded that Annie had not died instantly. She succumbed to blood loss from her injuries. The news of Annie's death reached her father while he was in Amsterdam during a layover on his way to Cape Town. Upon receiving the call from Shreen, he was devastated and barely remembered the details of the flight that followed. Meanwhile, the investigation had already begun. Hotel staff were among the first to be interviewed by the police, expressing surprise that the couple had ventured into such a dangerous neighborhood at night. It seemed an illogical choice for tourists staying at a prestigious 5-star hotel. When questioned, Shreen claimed that the idea to visit Gugulethu was Annie's. He stated that she wanted to see the real South Africa. Detectives found this explanation questionable, given the notoriously high crime rate in the area, which was well known to locals. Even taxi drivers typically avoided taking tourists there after dark. As the interrogations continued, the police began gathering evidence. One of the first breakthroughs came when fingerprints were discovered inside the minivan. They belonged to Zolile Mngeni, a man with a prior criminal record. Police apprehended him later that same day. Mngeni was found at home with 2 women and another man, apparently having recently returned from a nightclub where they had been drinking and using banned substances. Meanwhile, questions about the circumstances of the crime continued to pile up. From the outset, Detectives struggled to identify a motive. No ransom demands had been made, ruling out kidnapping for financial gain. There were also no indications of an assault with intent, which eliminated another possible explanation. Additionally, the attackers had not destroyed the vehicle to hide evidence, a common practice, and they had released both Shreen and the driver, leaving two witnesses who could identify them. Shreen, for his part, contacted Annie's relatives in Bristol to inform them of the tragedy. In a phone call, he apologized for not being able to protect her. His words seemed heartfelt, but they also raised questions among investigators. Why would an experienced taxi driver agree to take them into such a dangerous area? Why did Shreen allow the trip, knowing the potential risks? These and other questions became central to the ongoing investigation, which was soon to take an unexpected turn. While Shreen had returned to the UK, South African police uncovered new evidence shedding light on the circumstances of Annie's death. During a search of Zolile Mngeni's residence, they found items stolen from the minivan that had belonged to Annie. Under questioning, Mngeni admitted to the crime and provided the name of his accomplice, Mziwamadoda Kwabe. 2 days later, Kwabe was also taken into custody. At this point, the case seemed resolved, with investigators concluding that the crime was a random robbery gone wrong. But just days later, Mngeni gave a new statement. He alleged that the crime had been orchestrated and implicated another individual, referred to as Malo. In the police station hallway, Kwabe shouted at Malo to tell the truth, prompting another revelation: the involvement of the taxi driver, Zola Tongo. Initially seen as a victim of circumstance, Tongo suddenly became a key figure in the investigation. Faced with mounting evidence, Tongo agreed to cooperate with prosecutors and provided a confession. According to his account, the mastermind behind the crime was none other than Shreen Dewani. Tongo claimed that the day after the couple arrived in Cape Town, Shreen approached him with a proposal. Surveillance footage from the hotel confirmed the interaction. Shreen was seen leaving the lobby while Annie remained inside and speaking with Tongo for about 10 minutes. During this conversation, Tongo alleged, Shreen revealed that he wanted to get rid of someone, clarifying that he was referring to his wife. Meanwhile, just days earlier, a funeral service for Annie had taken place in London. The ceremony was held in a large rented hall where dozens of people gathered to pay their respects. Following the cremation, Annie's ashes were scattered over Lake Vänern in Sweden, where she had spent her childhood. However, Shreen's behavior in the days leading up to the funeral raised concerns among Annie's family. On the evening before the ceremony, Shreen hosted a pizza party, which her relatives found strange and inappropriate. His demeanor and actions seemed out of place for the somber occasion, deepening the suspicions of those closest to Annie. The allegations against Shreen shocked everyone who knew the couple. Annie's family was devastated when they learned of the version of events presented by Zola Tongo. The driver, previously seen as a respectable individual, claimed that the crime had been planned even before the couple arrived in South Africa. Tongo's recollections and the details he provided dramatically shifted the trajectory of the case, casting doubt on the initial narrative of a random attack. Upon arriving in Cape Town, Shreen Dewani and Zola Tongo began frequent communication. According to investigators, Tongo became a central figure in coordinating the crime. He alleged that, at Shreen's request, he contacted a third party, referred to as Malo, who then recruited two individuals, Zamamdoda Kwabe and Zolile Mngeni, to carry out the abduction and killing of Annie Dewani. The specifics of the arrangement, as described by Tongo, were shocking. Despite Shreen's considerable wealth, he reportedly offered only 15,000 South African rand, about $1,000 at the time, for the act. Tongo claimed that Shreen insisted the plan be executed quickly. To coordinate, they relied on text messages rather than phone calls to avoid raising Annie's suspicions. Cell phone records obtained by police revealed extensive communication between Shreen and Tongo on the day the couple arrived in Cape Town. However, the exact content of their messages could not be recovered because the texts had been deleted before investigators accessed the phones. This lack of evidence made the investigation more challenging, but did not rule out suspicions. The following evening, during dinner at a hotel restaurant, security footage showed Shreen leaving the table and Annie sitting alone. Shreen later explained that he had stepped away to take an urgent work call. However, records indicated that during this time, he contacted Tongo, and their call lasted about 5 minutes. This incident added to the growing list of questions investigators had about his actions. The most troubling events occurred on the night of Annie's death. According to phone records, even while they were in the car together, Shreen and Tongo were still texting each other. Investigators interpreted this as an attempt to ensure Annie wouldn't overhear their conversations. Unfortunately, the content of the messages could not be retrieved, as both men had deleted the texts. That night, while Annie's whereabouts were still unknown, Tongo claimed that Shreen asked him directly, "Is the job done?" Tongo allegedly responded, "Be careful with those words, there may be cameras around." Witnesses later recounted that after this exchange, Shreen looked up and glanced around, as if checking for surveillance equipment. These events formed the foundation of the case against Shreen Dewani, built on Tongo's testimony, phone records, and Shreen's behavior during critical moments. 3 days after the crime, hotel surveillance footage captured Shreen entering a room with Zola Tongo, holding a white envelope. Later, Tongo was seen leaving the hotel with the same envelope. It was believed to contain the money promised for carrying out the crime. Adding to the suspicion, Shreen had withdrawn a significant amount of cash from a bank shortly before the incident. When questioned by the police, he claimed the money was intended for a surprise helicopter ride for Annie. However, hotel staff confirmed that such services could have been easily arranged through them, making the involvement of a taxi driver unnecessary and suspicious. As the investigation progressed, inconsistencies in Shreen's account of the night became apparent. He stated that the assailants had taken all of Annie's jewelry, including her engagement ring. However, the ring was later found at the crime scene, raising critical questions about the accuracy of his story. These irregularities led to Shreen's arrest in Bristol. Although his family quickly bailed him out, suspicion continued to grow around him. Shreen's legal team insisted that the allegations against him were baseless and argued that orchestrating such a serious crime through a random taxi driver made no logical sense. However, the case took another twist when new evidence came to light. Several weeks later, a man named Leopold Leiser came forward with information. Leiser claimed he had been in an intimate relationship with Shreen for several months prior to the wedding. Leiser, a professional escort known by the alias the German Master, revealed that Shreen had hired his services multiple times. Additionally, police discovered that Shreen had been using the dating app Grindr, even during the days following the incident, when his wife's body had not yet been found. These revelations raised new questions about Shreen's potential motives. Investigators began to explore whether his actions were influenced by personal struggles related to his sexual orientation, and a possible desire to keep that part of his life hidden from his family and community. Shreen's defense attorneys argued that the suspects had intentionally implicated him in order to secure lighter sentences. Critics of this theory questioned how to explain the suspicious phone calls, deleted messages, and the large cash withdrawal made the day before the crime. 4 individuals involved in the abduction and death of Annie were arrested. 3 of them received prison sentences. Initially, none of them named Shreen as the mastermind behind the crime. His name surfaced only later, raising doubts about the credibility of their statements. Meanwhile, investigators continued searching for evidence to either confirm or refute Shreen's alleged involvement. Shreen was eventually extradited to South Africa to stand trial. His attorneys argued that the case should be dismissed due to a lack of concrete evidence. The court granted the motion, and Shreen was acquitted of all charges. After his release, he returned to his regular life. Today, Shreen openly acknowledges his orientation and lives with Brazilian photographer Gladson Lopez Martins. The two frequently travel and share glimpses of their life together on social media. This turn of events has raised numerous questions within Annie's family. Her father publicly described Shreen's actions as not only a betrayal, but also a profound insult to the memory of his daughter. Shreen Dewani remains one of the most controversial figures associated with this tragedy. His acquittal did little to provide closure for Annie's family, who still grapple with unanswered questions about his true role, motives, and actions on that fateful day. Although the case has officially been closed, public debate continues, with people divided over what they believe truly happened. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.